Hey dreamer. Tonight we're diving headfirst into one of the most awkward, dramatic and linen-draped chapters of human history, dating in ancient Rome. This isn't your high school Latin class. This is real Roman romance, the kind that involves love spells, parental contracts, poetry written on wax tablets, and the occasional public meltdown in a bathhouse. Because if you thought modern dating was hard, imagine trying to flirt in a society where your dad negotiates your love life like he's buying a used chariot. Your marriage is arranged before you hit puberty, and the most romantic compliment you'll ever get is, "You have excellent childbearing hips." Before you get too cozy, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more historical absurdity. And comment where you're listening from and what your favourite history topic is. I'm genuinely curious. Are you curled up in bed in Wisconsin, washing dishes in New Zealand, hiding in the break room during your third existential crisis of the day? I see you. Have you ever wondered what dating even meant in a world where marriage was a contract and love was optional? If you liked someone, did you flirt with poetry, or with your family name and a well-timed olive oil gift? Did teenagers in Rome have secret meetups, or were they basically supervised by the entire neighbourhood? What if your crush was already married to your uncle, and would your love survive the gossip, the rules, and the relatives? Well, congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Rome. Let's find out what the Roman dating life really was like. Your first brush with romance begins before you can even crawl. You've just been born and your parents are already eyeing the neighbour's toddler like they're eyeing livestock. Marriage, in Rome, is a long game. And you're a playing piece in a very strategic game of political Jenga. To you, life is a blur of naps, grapes mashed by other people, and trying to not fall off a lap. But to your parents, you're already a bargaining chip wrapped in swaddling cloth. The moment someone mentions a senator's new granddaughter, your mother perks up like a wolf spotting a limping goat. The matchmaking starts early. Not romantic matchmaking, strategic matchmaking. You are, after all, part of a respectable Roman family, or at least a family that would very much like to be. Every social gathering becomes a covert engagement fair. The dinner party isn't about food, it's about casually asking, "How old is your son now? Is he betrothed yet?" With a smile that hides the glint of competition. Families don't just want connections, they want upward mobility. A wedding is not about hearts and fireworks. It is about estates, names, and making sure your family doesn't end up poor and obscure with only a half-decent mosaic to remember you by. You, meanwhile, are busy eating sand and trying to walk in a tunic that feels like a tablecloth. You have no idea that someone just made an informal promise to marry you off to the governor's niece. You barely understand how doors work. But to adults, you're already part of a deal. A future sealed with a handshake over wine and suspiciously silent eye contact. The best part is that these arrangements are often agreed upon years in advance and then promptly forgotten or altered depending on who dies, who goes bankrupt, or who suddenly falls out of political favour after an unfortunate speech about sewage taxes. Your fate is not set in stone. It is scribbled in wax and frequently remelted. If your family is particularly ambitious, they may try to secure a match with someone above your station. This involves gifts, flattery, casual mentions of your father's imaginary connections to Julius Caesar, and if you're really lucky, your family might hire someone to compose a flattering poem about your future virtues, which they then slip under the door of the desired in-laws. At no point does anyone ask if you like the child in question. That's not relevant. Do they come from a good family? Can they bring land, titles, or at the very least a decent set of bedsheets to the marriage? That's what matters. Your feelings will be consulted somewhere around never. Meanwhile, the slaves gossip. They've seen this all before. They know which family produces screamers and which one has an aunt who drinks too much mulled wine and ruins negotiations by talking about her infected foot. They shake their heads as another betrothal is announced between two children who have met exactly once and both cried. You grow up hearing stories about love, sure, but they're the tragic kind. Love is for poetry and poor people. Marriages, those are about survival, about politics, about making sure you end up with enough land to raise goats and not so many enemies that someone poisons your well. You're 5 years old, wearing a tunic that feels like it was made from your grandma's curtains, and someone at dinner keeps poking you with a fig. Is it affection? Is it aggression? In Rome, it's often both. Childhood love is messy, loud, and always supervised by 3 aunts and an elderly slave who has seen some things. You're seated at the low table, your legs swinging freely because Roman furniture is clearly designed for people with longer limbs and more authority. Across from you is the culprit, a boy with grape juice on his chin and the chaotic energy of a caffeinated squirrel. He pokes you again with the fig. You retaliate with a breadcrumb flick. It is, in a way, your first romantic duel. Your aunts watch with expressions ranging from hopeful to horrified. One whispers that it reminds her of her own courtship. She was 17. Her future husband stole a chicken for her. You're 5, and this child just sneezed into the olive bowl. It's not quite the same. Meanwhile, the elderly slave responsible for the children hovers nearby like a war-weary general. She has seen decades of arranged engagements, stolen kisses, and toddlers trying to eat candle wax. Nothing surprises her anymore. You could propose to the fig poker right now and she'd probably hand you a small wreath and say good luck. Childhood affection in ancient Rome is strange and unspoken. You don't write love notes. You don't pass hearts made of papyrus. You show you care by sharing your best date, or not hitting someone with a toy cart. Affection is mostly expressed through mild bullying and occasionally feeding someone your last honey cake. And yet, despite the chaos, there's something sweet in the madness. You know who you like because you follow them around the garden for an hour pretending to be a wolf, or because they let you win at knucklebones, or because they didn't laugh when you fell face first into a water jug. Your parents, of course, are not concerned with your emotional development. They're more focused on whether the child comes from a respectable family. Do they have land? Are they politically useful? Do they carry themselves like someone who might one day own a decent number of goats? These are the questions that matter. But you don't care about land. You care about whether they can climb trees without falling, whether they know the good berry bush, and whether they'll share the last piece of dried apple from the pantry. Love, at this age, is simple. Not easy, but simple. Of course, it's not all innocent. There are whispers about children getting too close, a kiss stolen behind a pillar, a hand held too long during a festival. When this happens, everyone overreacts. You're marched in front of the family and scolded like you just tried to burn down the Senate. You're 5. You just like the way they laugh. And yet somehow, your tiny romantic drama becomes family gossip. For weeks, people refer to you as the one who tried to marry a merchant's son using a flower crown and a rock. It becomes legend. Aunts bring it up at every gathering. Your mother sighs and says you're just spirited. By the time you're 7, you've probably had 3 major crushes, 1 engagement rumour, and a lifelong fear of figs. You've learned that love even at this age, is both complicated and completely out of your control. Still, somewhere deep down, under all the noise and supervision and scratchy tunics, you start to understand what it means to care about someone. Even if that someone just threw a plum at your head, congratulations, you're now betrothed. You just don't remember it, because you were still working on your alphabet. Ancient Roman engagement parties were part political strategy, part awkward family reunion, and entirely devoid of your consent. You were probably playing with a carved wooden dog when it happened. One moment, you were chasing your cousin around a pillar. The next, someone clinked a cup, made a toast, and boom, you were promised to the slightly older child sitting 3 cushions away, eating olives with their whole face. That's your future spouse. Surprise! The adults are thrilled. There is wine, laughter, and several long quiet discussions in corners, while scribes hover nearby pretending not to listen. You, meanwhile, are mostly concerned with whether the honey cakes have arrived yet and why you're not allowed to wear shoes indoors. The betrothal ceremony is technically informal. It's not a legally binding marriage yet, but it might as well be. There are promises exchanged, tokens given, and one of your parents probably stood up and gave a short speech about family values and how beautiful your ears are going to be when you grow up. You don't hear any of this. You are 4 years old and currently stuck in a tunic that smells like lamp oil. If you're a girl, someone ties a ribbon around your waist and hands you a small gift from the groom's family. It's probably jewellery you're not allowed to wear or a doll dressed in mini bridal clothes. If you're a boy, you get a nod of approval and a warning not to disgrace the family name by falling off a balcony. Ancient Rome is very specific. You might receive a ring, not the romantic kind. It's an iron ring, symbolic, uncomfortable, and slightly too big. Your father says it's a sign of honor. You try to eat it. This is why nobody lets toddlers run empires. The guest list is mostly adults who are pretending to be excited but are really just here for the roasted dormice and to see whether the senator's wife will wear that ridiculous hat again. Children are an afterthought. You're led around the room, introduced to people who all smell like wine and ambition. Someone pinches your cheek. Someone else tries to guess your future political career based on your chin shape. You don't remember any of this. You'll grow up and hear about it second-hand. Your uncle will bring it up at every family gathering. Ah, yes, he'll say, the day you got betrothed to the little one with the giant forehead. We drank mulled wine until someone set their sleeve on fire. A good day. As you get older, the story becomes family folklore. Your mother insists you smiled when you saw your intended. Your father insists you fell asleep in the soup. Both are probably true. What matters is that the match was made. 2 families now have a tentative alliance sealed by the future possibility of shared goats and grandchildren. And if the arrangement falls through, if the other family moves to Gaul or gets caught up in a scandal involving counterfeit oil, the adults will simply find you another option. That's the beauty of being a Roman child. Your romantic destiny is fully adjustable until puberty. So no, you don't remember the party. But one day someone will hand you a faded token, point to a stranger at a banquet and say, "That's the one." You've been promised to them since the incident with the figs. You'll nod, politely, and quietly wonder what happens if you just run away. Your voice cracks. Hair sprouts. Your parents panic. It's time to seal that marriage deal before you fall in love with the wrong senator's daughter or start writing erotic poetry. Because nothing says Roman scandal like feelings. Puberty in ancient Rome is not treated as a tender time of self-discovery. It is treated as a crisis. a loud, hairy, emotional crisis that must be managed immediately. You are now considered dangerously close to having opinions and, worse, romantic impulses. This cannot be allowed. Your mother begins watching you like a hawk. Every time you pause too long in conversation with someone of the opposite sex, she narrows her eyes and clutches her pearls, which are probably real and definitely funded by your impending dowry. Your father grumbles about virtue and honour and starts scheduling more dinners with powerful families, usually ones with daughters who look like they've never blinked. If you're a girl, the anxiety doubles. You sneeze slightly too femininely, and suddenly your mother is weeping in the corner about how quickly time passes. You grow half an inch, and your aunt starts talking about how your hips are developing nicely. You would like to disappear into a wall. The family starts fast-tracking the betrothal paperwork, which is still somehow handled on wax tablets that smell faintly of bees and disappointment. Negotiations get tense. Is your family offering enough land? Is the groom's father really planning to retire soon? Or is he just pretending again? You're present for none of these discussions. You're upstairs yelling into a pillow because someone mentioned your eyebrows at dinner. Hormones rage. You become prone to daydreaming about people you've barely spoken to. The baker's apprentice, a flute player. That person you saw once at a festival who complimented your sandals and vanished into a crowd like a myth. You start writing poems. They are terrible. You show them to no one, except maybe the cat. Your teachers notice the shift. You once excelled at memorizing dates and reciting heroic speeches. Now you stare out the window during lessons on tax collection and draw hearts in the margins of your scroll. Your tutor pretends not to notice. He was young once too, briefly. Meanwhile, your parents are terrified that if they don't act quickly, you'll marry for love. Or worse, passion. Ancient Rome is built on structure, not chaos. And there is nothing more chaotic than a teenager in love with someone who cannot offer a politically convenient vineyard. And so, they push forward. You're suddenly being invited to more public events, family dinners, religious festivals, any excuse to parade you around like a slightly anxious fruit basket. You are not allowed to speak unless spoken to, but you must smile, not too much, just enough to seem interested in your future spouse, but not so much that people think you're desperate. It's a delicate balance. You're told to stand up straight, to speak clearly, to stop bringing up gladiators in casual conversation. Your father gives you a talk about duty. Your mother cries into her wine and mentions your birth story for the 4th time this week. You nod. You are trying. But inside you are mostly confused, sweaty, and still unsure how to walk without tripping over your own toga. Soon, your engagement will be finalized. You will be congratulated. People will say how grown up you look, and you will smile, because that is what is expected. But deep down, you will know the truth. You are still figuring out who you are, and your parents are just trying to get you married before your voice fully settles. You spot someone across the bathhouse. Damp, mostly naked and casually exfoliating with olive oil. This is your first crush. You attempt to smile, but it comes out like a facial spasm. Ancient flirting is difficult when you're sweating profusely and sharing a sponge on a stick. The Roman bathhouse is not exactly the ideal setting for romance. It smells like warm feet and ambition. The air is thick with steam and the sound of philosophers arguing about metaphysics while someone in the corner sings loudly and off-key. Naked people shuffle past with all the casual confidence of someone who has never once felt embarrassed in their life. You, on the other hand, are painfully aware of your own existence. Your crush is rinsing off with a jug of water and talking to a friend who is aggressively scrubbing his armpit. They both laugh. You have no idea why, but you laugh too from 20 feet away, alone, holding a pumice stone and radiating despair, smooth. You consider approaching. You rehearse a line in your head. Something subtle, maybe clever. But what comes out is a noise that might have been hello or possibly just a wheeze. They glance over. You panic and drop your towel. Now you're standing there, sweaty and half-covered, trying to pretend that slipping on olive oil was part of your personal grooming routine. You attempt to regain dignity by dramatically pouring water over your shoulder like the statues do. It lands mostly on your foot. You retreat to the benches, internally screaming. Your friend appears, slaps you on the back hard enough to dislodge a lung, and asks loudly if that's the person you've been writing bathhouse poetry about. You whisper, "Shut up," through clenched teeth. He grins and throws you under the aqueduct without hesitation. Your crush looks over again. You wave, weakly. They blink once, nod politely, and return to exfoliating their elbow like nothing happened. You feel both crushed and weirdly inspired. This is the closest to emotional intimacy you've ever felt while surrounded by sweating senators and slippery marble. Flirting in this environment is not for the faint of heart. There are no candles, no mood lighting, just rows of damp bodies and the constant risk of foot fungus. Your best hope is a lingering glance between steam clouds and a mutual appreciation for clean toes. It is less a courtship ritual and more a slippery, high-stakes obstacle course with nudity. You try again. You offer your crush a scrap of linen. They thank you politely. You interpret this as deep affection. You smile again. This time it's less of a spasm and more of a grimace. You are improving. Eventually you end up near each other on the same marble bench, pretending not to notice. You sit at a very respectful distance. You laugh too loudly at something your friend says. You casually flex your calf. It cramps. You pretend it was a philosophical gesture. You overhear them say they like figs. You immediately decide you too love figs more than life itself. You are now building your personality around their casual snack preference. Then it happens. A single moment of shared humanity. You both reach for the same bowl of water at the same time. Your hands almost touch. Almost. You both pause. There is eye contact. You say something intelligent like, They smile. Politely. Then stand up, wrap themselves in a towel with the grace of a minor deity, and leave. You watch them go, dripping slightly and unsure if you've just experienced romance or heat stroke. Probably both. You will think about that moment for the next 6 months. Still, the moment mattered. Not because it was perfect, but because it was yours. Your first crush. Your first bathhouse disaster. The first time your heart fluttered while someone scrubbed algae off their shin. In Rome, that counts as romance, and honestly, it's not the worst beginning. You want to flirt, but social media doesn't exist. Instead, you're scratching a poem into a wax tablet with a pointy stick. Romantic? Maybe. Legible? Definitely not. You hand it to a servant with instructions to deliver it discreetly. He trips, drops it in a puddle, and now your crush thinks you're confessing your love to a donkey. Welcome to the thrilling world of ancient Roman romance, where every sweet nothing is carved into bee-scented goo with the elegance of a toddler signing a tax form. Wax tablets are the preferred medium, not because they're practical or charming, but because paper is expensive and nobody trusts you with ink. So you dip your stylus into your clumsy teenage soul and try to summon something poetic. You want to say something beautiful, something bold. You end up writing something that translates roughly to "your eyes burn like hot bread and I would die for your ankles." It feels profound. It isn't. But this is your first love letter, and that counts for something. Then comes the delivery. You can't exactly slide into their villa unannounced. That's how you get slapped by a steward or arrested for loitering in the atrium. So you rely on the age-old courier system known as that one servant who owes you a favour. You hand him the tablet, whisper instructions, and watch him disappear into the chaos of Roman streets, dodging carts, dogs, and philosophical debates. Of course, the journey is never smooth. A goat sneezes, a child throws a date pit, the tablet gets smudged, or dropped, or mistaken for a shopping list. By the time it reaches your intended recipient, the wax has shifted slightly and now reads something that could be interpreted as, "I want to marry your donkey and worship your fence." They read it anyway. Then they reread it. They look confused, a little frightened. They glance over at you during the next gathering. You smile. They do not. Communication in Rome is rarely straightforward. Even if your message arrives intact, there's still the matter of interpretation. Is this a love letter? A joke? A secret political warning? The wax is vague and the handwriting is worse. Your stylus wobbled halfway through. That word might be heart or horse. It's unclear. And yet there's a thrill to it. You've put yourself out there. You've carved your feelings into something tangible, even if it now smells faintly of roasted figs. Maybe they'll write back. Maybe they'll send a reply with a pressed flower or a subtle nod in the marketplace. Or maybe they'll ignore it completely and you'll spend the next month avoiding eye contact and blaming everything on your cousin. Love letters are not just for the young and hopeful. Even adults in unhappy marriages sometimes send them. Secret notes passed through servants or hidden in laundry baskets. A line of verse tucked under a cushion. A heart scratched into a wine jug and then awkwardly denied. But for you, this is your first attempt. Your first awkward foray into romance, Roman style. You've risked embarrassment, ridicule, and possibly a goat-related misunderstanding. And even if nothing comes of it, you'll remember the rush, the sweaty palms, the thrill of seeing your crush across the courtyard and knowing that somewhere they are holding a melted tablet that once held your heart. You are officially ridiculous and deeply human, and that in Rome is the beginning of everything. You finally get invited to walk through the forum with your crush. It's magical. It's romantic. It's also heavily chaperoned by Aunt Lucilla, who interprets any eye contact as a prelude to moral collapse. You had pictured this moment differently. Maybe strolling beneath marble arches, maybe exchanging witty remarks about gladiator politics, maybe a casual brush of fingers while admiring a statue of Jupiter. Instead, you are sandwiched between your beloved and a woman who believes that figs are a gateway to sin. Aunt Lucilla walks precisely one half step behind you, close enough to hear every breath, but far enough to pretend she's just out for fresh air. Her eyes never blink. She scans your every movement like a hawk with a superiority complex and a personal vendetta against joy. Your crush tries to speak to you. They lean slightly in your direction. Aunt Lucilla makes a soft noise in her throat, something between a cough and a warning growl. They retreat like they've just offended the gods. You smile awkwardly and pretend to admire a fountain. The fountain is broken. It hisses like your aunt. Every time you exchange so much as a glance, Lucilla finds a reason to interrupt. Did you hear about the weather in Syracuse? Have you had your posture assessed recently? I once knew a girl who made eye contact for too long, and now she raises ducks alone in the countryside. You try to steer the conversation back toward something light. Poetry, maybe, or music. You ask if your crush likes liars. Before they can answer, Lucilla launches into a 12-minute monologue about how liars cause laziness and soft morals. She ends with a story involving a neighbour's cousin and a cursed mandolin. You stop asking questions. At one point, your crush dares to smile at you. Lucilla immediately offers them a prune and begins discussing bowel regularity. You are fairly certain this is a power move. You consider retaliating by complimenting your crush's sandals, but worry she'll summon a priest. You pause to admire a merchant's stall. Your crush steps closer. Your elbows almost touch. It is the most intimate moment of your entire week. Aunt Lucilla clears her throat so loudly that a passing goat flees in alarm. You try to walk faster. She walks faster. You pause to tie your sandal. So does she. You point out a sculpture. She explains in great detail why it is morally offensive. You mention you once saw a play. She gasps and begins praying softly in Latin. Despite everything, the moment is still yours. The walk is still happening. You are breathing the same air as your crush. Even if you're not allowed to touch it, you pass a bakery. The smell of honey cakes fills the air. You glance at your crush. They glance back. You both smile. For a second, Aunt Lucilla is distracted by a suspiciously dressed statue. You exchange one word. Just one. Hello. It is the most daring thing either of you has ever done. You will remember it forever. By the time the walk ends, your crush is escorted home by a different, slightly less judgmental relative. You are left with Lucilla, who is muttering about the decline of civilization and the dangers of youthful exuberance. She offers you a pamphlet on chastity. You accept it politely and plan to feed it to the neighbour's donkey. But later, when you are alone, you replay every moment, every sideways glance, every smothered laugh, even the prune incident. It wasn't freedom, it wasn't passion, but it was something. It turns out you've fallen for someone wildly inappropriate. Perhaps they're from the wrong class. Or worse, a poet. You start writing dramatic verses about moonlight and doom. Everyone thinks you're being profound. Really, you're just deeply sleep-deprived and full of olives. Your heart aches. Your stomach aches. Your head aches from staying up too late composing lines. Like your eyes are darker than the Tiber in winter, and I would rather be exiled to Gaul than live without your gaze. You believe these are the finest words ever written. They are not, but no one has the heart to tell you, because you're reciting them out loud in the atrium at breakfast. Your friends try to intervene. One suggests you go outside. Another tells you to maybe write about something else for a while. You snarl and say, "Love is suffering." They roll their eyes and say you've been insufferable since last week's poetry reading where you almost fainted from emotional intensity. Your mother is concerned. She's heard rumours that you've been spotted loitering near the marketplace where the actors gather. She reminds you that these people do not own land and may not even have proper napkins. You remind her that love is not a legal contract. She reminds you that in Rome, actually it is. You continue writing. You scratch verses into wax tablets and hide them behind statues. You pay a servant to deliver a folded note with a single pressed flower inside. The note says, "I burn." The flower is wilted. The servant drops it in the fish sauce on the way over. Your beloved receives a soggy confession and interprets it as a threat. Despite this, you are convinced the feeling is mutual. You saw them glance in your direction once, which must mean something. Never mind that they were probably just checking for approaching carts. You replay the moment endlessly. The look, the air, the faint smell of roasted chestnuts drifting by. It's all part of your tragic narrative. Your poetry becomes more elaborate. You start adding references to mythical lovers and obscure constellations. You light a candle and read to the moon. You write sonnets to a pair of sandals they once wore. One of them breaks and you spiral for days. It is clearly a sign. Your tutor notices the shift in your studies. You've stopped memorizing military treaties and now spend your lessons asking whether love is stronger than law. He sighs and reminds you that Cicero never once cried over a sandal. You tell him Cicero lacked depth. Eventually word gets around. Your family holds a meeting. They say things like inappropriate, unsuitable, and we have plans for you. You say things like destiny and soul fire, and it was meant to be. Your father looks like he might eat his scrolls out of frustration. Your aunt cries and says you are too sensitive. You agree sensitivity is your gift and your curse. You're told to forget. You try. You eat figs. You take long walks. You throw yourself into studying tax codes. Nothing works. You see the face in every marble bust and their name in every cloud. You're unbearable, even to yourself. But time passes. The poetry fades. The feelings soften. One day you find an old wax tablet under your bed. You read it and cringe so hard your toga wrinkles. You can't believe you once compared their voice to thunder wrapped in silk. It doesn't even make sense. Still, you keep the tablet. You don't know why. Maybe to remember how it felt to fall hard, to write badly, to care too much. It was ridiculous, beautiful. Your parents have had enough. They call in family friends, make tea, and begin casually auctioning off your hand in marriage like it's a slightly cracked amphora. You sit in the corner eating grapes and wondering if it's too late to join a monastery. The meeting starts with polite greetings and a lot of nodding. Then out come the ledgers, the family crests, and the overly cheerful statements like such a fine young person and such sturdy calves. You are referred to exclusively in the third person. No one makes eye contact with you. You're both present and invisible, like a decorative vase that can talk but shouldn't. You're not technically for sale. That would be indecent. But let's not kid ourselves. The negotiations are brisk and transactional. Prospective matches are discussed like real estate. This one has land near the coast, this one's father owns 6 grain stores, this one's sister once dated a magistrate, so they must be reputable. You continue eating grapes and wondering what your backup plan is if all of this ends in you marrying someone who blinks too loudly. One family arrives with their son. He is tall, silent, and wearing sandals with slightly too many straps. He bows. You nod. Aunt Lucilla asks if you're feeling a connection. You say you're feeling mildly itchy. She takes this as a sign of compatibility. The son sits beside you. There is a long silence. He asks if you like statues. You say you have no strong opinion. He says he once touched a statue that may have been cursed. You smile politely and look at your grapes. This is going well. Your mother is discussing dowries now. She says things like manageable expectations and generous spirit, while gently sliding a plate of olives toward the other family like it's part of the deal. You know from experience that olives mean they want this match. Dried figs would mean mild interest. Honey cakes would mean desperation. No one has brought out the honey cakes yet. Thank the gods. Another suitor arrives with an entourage. He brings gifts. A jar of imported fish sauce, a cloak pin in the shape of an eagle. a poem he claims to have written himself, which is suspicious because it's in someone else's handwriting and references battles he was definitely not alive for. Your parents are impressed. You are less impressed. He calls you radiant, which is nice, but then tells a long story about a dream he had involving a talking goat, and you are now emotionally checked out. You try to speak up. You say things like, perhaps we should wait, or maybe I should get to know them first. These suggestions are met with warm smiles and vague statements about the wisdom of elders and how feelings are temporary, but a good aqueduct lasts forever. Aunt Lucilla recommends someone who isn't even present. He's away studying rhetoric in Athens, but she assures everyone he has very promising ankles. Your cousin suggests you marry into a family with access to marble quarries. Your father briefly considers it before remembering that quarry people are too dusty. You begin to fantasize about a quiet life alone in a tower with a cat and a stack of scrolls. Maybe you'll write plays. Maybe you'll pretend to be cursed. Maybe you'll fake your own disappearance and re-emerge as an oracle. Anything seems better than being matched with the goat dream poet or sandal boy. But by the end of the meeting, a short list is made. Everyone is pleased. The olives are gone. A few names are written down on a wax tablet next to yours, like entries in a particularly awkward raffle. You sigh. Your fate is sealed in grapes and gossip. The deal is struck. You're to marry someone who owns 3 vineyards and a personality best described as moist bread. The dowry your parents provide could finance a small war, and your emotional input is not required. You learn the news the same way people learn about impending natural disasters, quietly, with polite nods, and a tray of celebratory figs you didn't ask for. Your mother is beaming. Your father is smug. Aunt Lucilla whispers something about destiny. You're still chewing. The dowry agreement is a marvel of Roman bureaucracy. It's written on a wax tablet so thick it could double as a shield. There are witnesses, scribes, and a man whose only job seems to be standing in the corner and looking solemn. The sum involved includes coins, linens, livestock, and something called a future inheritance clause, which you suspect involves olives. The groom arrives with a scroll detailing his assets. He's got vineyards, bath privileges in multiple districts, and a large forehead. He wears a tunic with very confident embroidery and refers to himself in the third person. You sit there wondering if it's possible to feign sudden religious devotion and flee to a temple. No one asks how you feel. That would be unnecessary. You are a puzzle piece in a larger picture of strategic land acquisition and social elevation. You try to raise an eyebrow in protest, but are immediately handed a bracelet. Your mother assures you that love comes later. Like mildew, your father tells you to focus on the grapes. Think of the wine. Think of the legacy. Think of how lucky you are to secure someone whose family is only slightly under investigation for tax fraud. The groom attempts conversation. He tells you about his wine storage methods, and once winning a speech contest judged by his cousin. You smile and nod. He offers you a pear. It is bruised. Symbolic, perhaps. You retreat to your room to process. Your friend sneaks in with the stolen honey cake and sympathy. You lie on your back and stare at the ceiling, trying to imagine a future in which you don't slowly evaporate from boredom. Your friend suggests poisoning the wine. You laugh. Sort of. The next day, the dowry exchange begins. Items are moved. Gold is weighed. A servant carries a goose in a basket as if it's made of porcelain. Everyone is thrilled, especially the goose who escapes and causes mild chaos in the garden. You take it as a sign. No one else does. There's talk of the wedding date. You are reminded gently to be available, polite and unreasonably radiant. You practice your neutral smile in the mirror. It looks haunted. Your friend says that's perfect. At dinner, your father toasts to your future. The groom's father toasts to strong ankles. Someone toasts to great futures. You sip your watered wine and wonder if this is what it means to grow up, to trade poetry and bathhouse glances for coin counting and speeches about fermentation ratios. Still, the match is good, sensible, stable. Your family is secure. You'll have warm clothes, a large house, and access to above-average olive oil. You might even grow to like the moist bread man. Maybe. But as you lie in bed that night, you whisper a quiet farewell to the idea of love letters and moonlit sighs. Those belong to poets. You now belong to economics, and possibly to the goose, if it returns. Your wedding day arrives. There's incense. There's screaming. There's a man in a wolf mask for some reason. You've never felt more like a mildly confused sacrificial goat. Everyone keeps crying, even your dog. You wake up early, not out of excitement, but because your aunt burst into your room holding a bowl of barley and shouting something about omens. She begins throwing flower petals in your face while sobbing softly and patting your head like it might fall off. Your mother is pacing. Your cousin is ironing your wedding tunic with a heated brick. Your dog, sensing chaos, has hidden under a table and is whimpering into someone's sandal. The house smells like flowers, sweat, and whatever incense they're burning to ward off bad luck and emotional honesty. You are bathed, perfumed, and dressed by a team of relatives who all have strong opinions about your belt. Someone insists it must be knotted in a special way. You ask what happens if you tie it wrong. They go silent and stare at the floor, encouraging. The groom arrives with his entourage, all smug and over-oiled. His tunic is freshly laundered. His hair has been curled. He looks like a loaf of bread that's been buttered for battle. You smile at him. He says something complimentary about your elbows. The bar is low. You are led through the streets in a procession that is meant to be festive but feels like a mild hostage situation. There's music, chanting, and one man playing an instrument that might just be a pot lid. Someone throws nuts. A child screams. A goat appears briefly and vanishes. You nod at the goat in solidarity. When you arrive at the groom's house, you're greeted by more wailing. This is traditional. You're supposed to cry too, but you're dehydrated and emotionally numb. Instead, you blink slowly and hope no one notices your complete dissociation. At the door, there is a symbolic ritual. You smear oil on the threshold, step over it carefully, and say the traditional words, which translate roughly to, "May this not be a terrible mistake." Then you are welcomed in with loud cheers and a man in a wolf mask jumps out and howls. This is also traditional. You try not to scream. Inside, the wedding feast begins. There is bread, cheese, more nuts, and a lot of wine. You are seated beside your new husband, who whispers a joke about drainage systems. You laugh politely and drink your wine a little too fast. Someone toasts to fertility. Someone else toasts to a long marriage. Your uncle toasts to finally getting his platter back. Everyone is emotional. Midway through the feast, you are presented with a wedding cake made from spelt and honey. It is dry and crumbly, and someone drops part of it into a brazier. You decide this is symbolic of something, but are too tired to work out what. Finally, the formal ceremony concludes with the lifting of the veil. Your husband sees your face properly for the first time all day. He smiles. You try to smile back, but it comes out as more of a grimace. The room cheers anyway. You are officially married. Later, as the sun sets and the party drifts into hazy singing and philosophical arguments about cheese, you sit quietly, still in your ceremonial shoes, watching the dog chew on a ribbon. You are married. You have become part of someone else's household. You have been toasted, blessed, and handed symbolic bread. It was not the wedding you dreamed of as a child, but then again, as a child you mostly dreamed of owning a goat and living in a tower. So maybe this is close enough. The wedding night is less passion, more logistics. There are extremely awkward toasts and a vague sense that someone should have explained where babies come from before this very moment. It begins with a gentle reminder from your aunt that this is a sacred duty, and also no pressure, but the family is expecting a grandson by next Saturnalia. You nod solemnly while trying not to choke on your third honey cake. Your new husband looks equally dazed. He offers you more wine. You accept. The mood is less romantic and more like two strangers accidentally trapped in a storage closet during a banquet. The guests finally leave, dragging themselves home full of nuts, cheese, and unsolicited advice. Someone offers you a fertility charm on their way out. Another person pats your shoulder like you're heading into battle. You and your husband exchange a look that says, well, here we are. The bedroom is full of flowers, incense, and nervous energy. There's a ceremonial bed that creaks when you look at it too hard, and a slightly wilted garland draped over the headboard. In the corner, a brazier crackles softly. The dog is thankfully not present. Small mercies. You sit down and immediately realize no one gave you instructions. The actual mechanics of the night remain vague. You've heard stories, mostly from older cousins with dramatic flair and very little accuracy. You're fairly sure some of those stories involved wild animals and cannot possibly be correct. Your husband clears his throat. You clear yours. He says something about the weather. You nod and mention figs. There is a long silence. Somewhere, an owl hoots ominously. You lie on your back, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many generations before you have lived through this exact horror. Probably hundreds, possibly thousands, all of them wondering why no one just sits you down beforehand with a scroll and some diagrams. Your husband is polite, respectful, terrified. You are also polite, respectful, equally terrified. Eventually you inch toward each other like two nervous turtles. The next half hour is a blur of apologies, confusion, and one minor collision involving a decorative pillow and a poorly placed candlestick. Afterward you lie there in silence. You are not in love. You are not even sure if what just happened counts as anything worth recording, but you are married. Officially, legally, fully transitioned into the next chapter of Roman adulthood. He asks if you want more wine. You do. He asks if you want to talk about what just happened. You do not. He nods and begins talking about vineyard maintenance. You close your eyes and pretend to listen. Despite the awkwardness, there's a strange comfort in it. You both survived. No one burst into flames. No gods appeared to smite you for lack of technique. It was clumsy and unremarkable, but also strangely human. You look over at him. He is snoring gently, one arm flopped off the bed. You pull the covers up and stare at the ceiling again. Maybe passion will come later, or maybe you'll just grow old together, tolerating each other over shared olives and annual arguments about tile repair. Either way, the wedding night is complete. History has moved one step forward. And you? You've entered a new phase of life, one confusing, absurd, and a little sticky. You are now part of a new household. It smells like old cheese and failed ambition. Your new mother-in-law greets you with the warmth of a frozen eel. This is your new life. No take-backs. You arrive with your dowry, your tunics, your carefully packed collection of mildly offensive poetry scrolls, and a deep, gnawing sense of dread. The servants unload everything into the atrium while your new husband points out which statues are ancestral and which ones are just decorative. You nod and try not to cry. The house echoes when you walk, like it's judging your footsteps. Your new mother-in-law emerges from the shadows like a well-fed basilisk. She is tall, severe, and dressed in all grey, even though it's summer. She looks you up and down with the intensity of a tax collector and says something like, "Well, at least you're clean." You are unsure if this is a compliment or the start of a curse. The rest of the household includes a mute uncle who may or may not be alive, a cousin who writes bad poetry about vegetables, and several servants who move like ghosts and refuse to make eye contact. No one laughs. No one blinks. You begin to suspect this house runs on passive-aggressive tension and stale lentils. You are given a room at the back of the house. It is technically a room in the same way a barrel is technically a boat. The walls are damp. The window sticks. There is a chair that might have once been cursed by Jupiter himself. Still, it's yours. You decorate it with a few stolen flowers and try to feel hopeful. Mealtimes are tense. Your husband talks about crop rotation. Your mother-in-law complains about everything. The wine is too sour. The slaves are too cheerful. The neighbours are suspiciously quiet. You smile and chew your bread very slowly, praying the conversation doesn't turn to you. But it always does. She wants to know if you can sew. You can't. If you can cook. Barely. If you've ever raised goats. Not intentionally. She sighs and begins a long speech about the decline of Roman virtue, and how women used to know how to dye wool without crying. You nod and thank her for the advice. She tells you not to interrupt. You try to bond with your husband. He shows you his vineyard records and explains how fermentation works. You listen politely while wondering if you could sneak away and join a travelling theatre troupe. He is kind in the way a damp towel is kind, soft, non-threatening, and mildly disappointing. Days pass. You learn the layout of the house. You avoid the angry goose in the courtyard. You pretend to enjoy your mother-in-law's stewed turnip surprise. You even begin writing new poetry, mostly about loneliness and how much you miss your own bed. One afternoon you receive a letter from home. Your sister writes that your dog misses you and has taken to sleeping on your old sandals. You cry a little. You tell no one. Later that week, your husband brings you a small jar of honey and says he thought of you when he saw it at the market. It's a small gesture, but it's something. You say thank you. He smiles. Your mother-in-law mutters something about frivolity, but you don't care. You are still adjusting, still learning, still occasionally dreaming of running into the forest and becoming a hermit who communicates only in bird calls. But for now, you stay. You eat your honey. You survive dinner. You settle into married life. It mostly involves weaving, passive aggression, and being asked if you're with child every time you look slightly bloated. Your husband spends a lot of time at the forum. You suspect he's arguing about drainage systems. Your days begin early, usually with your mother-in-law shouting at a servant about how olives are being stored improperly. You pretend not to hear and remain under the blanket for as long as is socially acceptable, which is roughly the length of time it takes to recite a short hymn to Juno and question all of your life choices. Breakfast is bread, cheese, and silence. Occasionally someone grunts a blessing. Occasionally someone sneezes and is accused of inviting bad harvests. It's a warm and lively home if your idea of warmth includes judgmental stares and lukewarm barley porridge. Your husband leaves after breakfast, draped in a toga and muttering about public business. You nod like you understand what he does, which you do not. You suspect it involves scrolls, long meetings, and the occasional emergency involving clay pipes and soggy roads. You briefly consider following him one day just to see if he's actually doing civic duties, or just eating dates and complaining about aqueduct flow with other men in sandals. Back at home, your tasks include weaving, more weaving, and feigned interest in household gossip. Your loom becomes your closest friend. You whisper your frustrations to it as you weave, pouring your dreams into wool and hoping no one notices your angry knots. Social visits become your one outlet. Other wives arrive with stories, fans, and opinions. You sip watered wine and nod sagely, while someone recounts how her cousin's daughter got pregnant by a flute player and now lives near a swamp. Another shares that her husband has taken a mistress and claims it's purely for political strategy. You say nothing, mostly because you're too busy mentally fleeing the country. Your mother-in-law pops in at regular intervals to comment on your posture, your embroidery, and the way you breathe too loudly when walking upstairs. She asks if you've conceived yet. You tell her no, but your left ankle has been very productive lately. She doesn't laugh. She never does. Evenings are quiet. Your husband returns home smelling faintly of wine and urban debate. He tells you about someone who shouted during a Senate meeting. You tell him about the time the laundry caught fire and the dog ate a guest's sandal. Neither of you listens closely, but the effort counts. Once in a while you find a moment of actual connection. You both laugh at something ridiculous, like your cousin's new hairstyle or a neighbour's dramatic overreaction to a lost chicken. These flashes are rare, but oddly comforting. You don't love him, not yet, maybe not ever, but sometimes you like him. And in Roman marriage that's ahead of schedule. You go to bed early, you lie on your side and stare at the wall, wondering what your life might have been if you'd been born a man. Or a goat. Goats, you imagine, don't get asked about fertility during dinner. They just exist. Eat things. Occasionally kick someone. It seems peaceful. And yet, in your own quiet way, you're learning how to exist here too. Not happily, not perfectly, but steadily. You've adapted to the smells. You've memorized the floor creaks. You've learned how to nod without agreeing, and how to survive a 3-hour discussion about wool prices. You are married. You are woven into this household now, thread by thread, day by day. And like all Roman households, it somehow holds together, even if no one knows exactly how. If you want power, you throw dinner parties. You smile at strangers, praise the wine, and pretend you enjoy being compared to someone's favourite goat. One senator comments on your elbows. You thank him. No one knows why. The house is scrubbed from top to bottom. Cushions are fluffed. Incense is lit. You spend 3 hours arguing over which reclining couches smell the least like fermented fish sauce. The kitchen is in chaos. There are 15 different types of olives being plated on miniature dishes, and someone is crying over a burnt dormouse. This is your arena now. Not the battlefield, not the courtroom, but the dining room, where reputations are seasoned and reputations are burned. You dress carefully. Not too expensive, not too plain. You want to look successful, but not like you're trying. Your hair is styled within an inch of its life, and your earrings clink every time you breathe. Your mother-in-law tells you that your neckline is one finger width too bold. You thank her with a smile that says, "I dream of being buried alive in figs." Guests arrive at sundown, senators, merchants, wives with strong opinions and husbands who nod too much. You greet each one like you were born delighted to host them, even the man who once claimed women shouldn't speak during public readings and now smells faintly of vinegar. You laugh at his joke anyway. This is diplomacy. The first course is served. Pickled vegetables, spiced eggs, possibly a fish, possibly a mistake. You smile and murmur polite things while watching your husband argue about grain taxes with someone who owns half a hill. You're more focused on the senator across the table who holds influence over 3 provinces and is currently asking if your sandals are made from real goat leather. You laugh again. You say something coy. You compliment his wife's new tunic, which you know is a recycled bedspread. She beams and offers you a fig stuffed with honey and ground pepper. You eat it, even though it tastes like regret. Midway through the meal, your cousin spills wine on a map. Someone else chokes on a date pit. A philosophical debate breaks out about whether dreams are messages from the gods or just bad digestion. You nod along while quietly calculating how many of these guests you'll have to flatter again next week. You slip in compliments like olive oil, smooth, slippery, untraceable. You say things like "what wise thoughts" and "how well spoken, and I can see why everyone admires your judgment." You are pouring syrup onto egos and watching them swell. Your husband, to his credit, brings up your embroidery, says you're quite gifted. Everyone nods politely, but no one cares. You quickly redirect the conversation toward the senator's new villa. He perks up immediately and begins describing the columns in detail. You pretend to care deeply about load-bearing architecture. The evening ends with honey cakes and one last toast to the household gods. You're exhausted. Your face hurts from smiling. Your feet hurt from standing. Your brain hurts from listening to a man compare you to his cousin's prize-winning goat for the 3rd time. But it was worth it. Later, your husband says the senator might recommend him for a new post. Your name was mentioned twice in polite circles. A woman who once ignored you now wants a recipe for your spiced carrot stew, which doesn't exist, but you'll invent one. This is how power grows in Rome, not through battles or lawmaking, but through fig platters, nods, and strategic compliments about someone's elbow shape. It's absurd, it's exhausting, and you're getting very, very good at it. Rome is full of temptation. Affairs are common, discreet, and occasionally poetic. You receive a token in the form of a flower tucked into a sandal. It's from the baker. You consider it. The baker is younger than your husband. He has arms like fresh kneaded dough and eyes that suggest he has read poetry, but doesn't take it too seriously. You see him at the market sometimes, arranging loaves in a way that's suspiciously artistic. He always gives you the warmest roll. Sometimes 2. Once, a honey cake that made your knees weak and your mother-in-law furious. You tell yourself it's nothing, a coincidence, a carbohydrate-based misunderstanding, but then you see it again. The flower, tucked in the sandal strap, not a romantic bloom like a rose or lily. No, this is Rome. It's a sprig of fennel, bold, unexpected, slightly medicinal. You're intrigued. At home, your husband is droning on about grain tariffs again. He gestures vaguely with his cup of wine while you nod and pretend to be fascinated. Your mind, however, is with the baker, wondering if he meant anything, wondering if he always smells like cinnamon. wondering if this is madness or just a very mild, flower-dusted flirtation. Affairs in Rome are everywhere, like pigeons or bad mosaics. Some are passionate, others are transactional. Most are conducted with elaborate discretion involving slaves, secret doorways, and very committed whispering. You're not planning anything, but you are imagining things, like what it would be like to talk to someone who asks about your thoughts instead of your pickling technique. The next day, the baker slips you a fig tart wrapped in cloth. You unwrap it like a sacred relic. It is perfect. You eat it slowly, in a corner of the garden, pretending you are a tragic heroine in a romantic play that ends with mild scandal and an upgrade in wardrobe. Your mother-in-law nearly catches you smiling and asks if your digestion is acting up. You say yes, and she recommends a boiled turnip. The line between innocent indulgence and full-blown affair is thin and constantly shifting. One moment you're accepting a pastry. The next, you're making elaborate excuses to visit the market. You tell your husband you've taken an interest in millet. He blinks and nods. He is just happy you're not writing poetry again. Eventually the baker speaks. It's early morning. The stalls are still being set up, and you are pretending to compare lentils. He leans close and says, "You deserve better bread." You nearly drop the lentils. You do not speak. You nod, take the warm loaf he hands you, and leave with the grace of someone who just committed a minor emotional crime. That night you dream of him. It is ridiculous. He's not even holding you. He's holding a tray of biscuits and telling you your elbows look like freedom. You wake up feeling both amused and deeply conflicted. Because you know how this goes. You've seen it. Affairs end in tears, poetry, or awkward encounters at festivals. They begin with side glances and end with someone moving to Sicily. You do nothing, mostly. You keep the fennel sprig. You never mention the tart. You tell yourself it was just a game, a tiny, edible rebellion, a reminder that you are still young, still desired, still capable of imagining things beyond loom and ladle. The baker never pushes. He continues to smile, to pass you bread with a knowing look and no pressure. You return the look. Then you go home, back to your life, your weaving, and your mildly damp husband. Rome is full of temptations, but sometimes the fantasy is enough. Your husband is seen at the baths with a flute girl. You take the high road, then the petty road, then you tell his mother. Ancient Rome runs on gossip, and revenge is best served lukewarm in front of witnesses. You hear it from your cousin's friend's servant who swears on her favourite sandal strap that she saw him laughing and splashing around like a carefree dolphin, with a flute girl, a young one, hair curled, tunic barely covering scandal. You nod, you thank her, you calmly excuse yourself and immediately go into your room to aggressively comb your hair and mumble at the walls. Of course you're not surprised. Roman men are like amphorae, useful, heavy, and often found rolling round where they don't belong. You know the rules. Affairs are expected, shrugged off. But that doesn't mean you have to accept it quietly. No, that's not the Roman way. The Roman way involves strategy, mild humiliation, and baked goods as weapons. Step 1 is the high road. You smile, you act serene, you serve his favourite lentils with extra herbs, you compliment his toga drape, you laugh at his story about sewer funding like you didn't rehearse the laugh 12 times beforehand. You even ask him about his day, nodding thoughtfully as he describes water table levels and forum politics. He thinks he's safe. You let him think that. Then comes step 2, subtle pettiness. You rearrange the household shrine so his favourite statuette of Mercury faces the wall. You tell the servants he now prefers lukewarm wine and figs cut into triangles. You give away his second best sandals to your sister as a gift for a man who truly deserves them. You start wearing a perfume called Vindicta that smells vaguely like basil and triumph. He doesn't notice. Yet. Then, step 3. You unleash the most ancient and terrifying weapon available, his mother. You time it perfectly, mid-meal between the olives and the boiled eel. You sigh, press your napkin to your lips, and say you're sure the flute girl was very talented. The room falls silent. Your husband chokes on his wine. His mother gasps like she's seen a ghost in mismatched earrings. She slowly lowers her spoon, and then she erupts. She asks questions, loudly, with increasing volume and decreasing coherence. She starts invoking ancestors. She demands names, dates, witnesses. You sip your wine like it's the last cup before the empire falls. She begins a monologue about morals, family honour, and the decline of civilization since the fall of Carthage. You sit back and enjoy the performance. By the time she's done, your husband looks like a damp, penitent tunic. But you don't stop there. Oh no, this is Rome. Theatrical pettiness is a public duty. You write a poem, a dramatic, slightly unhinged ode about betrayal, liars, and men who smell like disappointment and undercooked barley. You recite it at your friend's dinner party. It spreads faster than a fever in summer. Someone sets it to music. Someone else illustrates it on a wall. You pretend not to notice as people hum your heartbreak at the market. Your husband becomes nervous. He starts bringing home figs. He compliments your weaving. He asks about your day. You respond politely and mention that you've taken up pottery. Specifically, crafting small clay models of animals who mate for life. He nods, terrified. You smile. Eventually you let the fire cool, the public humiliation complete, the petty satisfaction digested. You and your husband return to your normal routine, but now he walks a little straighter, says thank you more, stays at the baths exactly 22 minutes before returning home like he's on a schedule set by the gods. You never say outright that you forgave him, 'cause you didn't, not exactly. But you reminded him who he married, a woman who can smile sweetly while casually dismantling his entire reputation over dessert. And in Rome, that's not just justice, that's foreplay. You visit the temple for spiritual guidance. The Vestal Virgin suggests patience, prayer, and perhaps throwing a shoe. You nod solemnly and light a candle. Then you throw the shoe anyway. It lands with a dramatic slap near a statue of Vesta. A nearby worshipper flinches. You pretend it was an offering. The Vestal nods slowly, the way someone nods at a goat wearing a toga. You've come seeking wisdom, but mostly you're here because you're tired of pretending everything is fine and your husband just complimented another woman's olive platter in public. The temple is cool and quiet, a rare refuge from the noise of your household. You sit on a stone bench while incense curls through the air like lazy judgment. You're surrounded by marble goddesses with better posture than you and expressions that suggest they never once burned the stew. You whisper a prayer, not for peace, not for clarity, just for the strength to get through another week of strategic dinner parties and aggressively neutral marital conversations. The Vestal Virgin assigned to your visit appears serene and terrifying. She's young, but somehow her stare makes you feel like you've been caught stealing fruit at age 7. She listens to your troubles with the calm detachment of someone who has never been married, never hosted a senator, and never had to smile while being compared to someone else's cousin's second wife. She tells you to reflect, to center yourself, to embrace your role with dignity. You nod. She says patience is a virtue. You nod again. Then she says sometimes a shoe in the right direction can speak louder than a scroll. You pause. You like her now. A lot. She lights a small oil lamp and motions for you to do the same. You fumble it a little, nearly dropping the wick, and she says nothing. Just watches, lips tight, like a woman who has seen people pray for everything from fertility to winning an argument about cheese. You tell her your husband is distracted lately. She arches an eyebrow. You add that you are considering writing another poem. Her eye twitches slightly. She leans in. She whispers that while she cannot officially condone revenge, the gods do tend to reward creative efforts. She mentions a story of a woman who used her husband's own sandals to deliver anonymous gossip. Another who faked a vision from Juno to get her mother-in-law to move out. You listen like a student at the feet of a master. She gives you a small charm, a piece of carved bone shaped like a fig. It is supposed to protect the wearer from betrayal and mildly offensive poetry. You tuck it into your sleeve and thank her. You leave the temple feeling lighter. Not better exactly, but fortified, as if you just drank a cup of spiritual vinegar and now your spine is straighter. Back home you find your husband napping in the atrium, one sandal off, drooling slightly. You smile. Not cruelly, just knowingly. You light a small lamp and place it near the household gods. You murmur a quiet thanks to the Vestals, and to Vesta, and to the shoe. You will not start a war. Not today. You will not write another verse. Yet. But your patience now has structure. Intention. You feel strangely powerful for someone who just spent an afternoon talking to a woman who hasn't spoken to a man in 15 years. Sometimes in Rome, wisdom doesn't come from scrolls or scholars or senators. It comes from quiet temples, veiled women, and the satisfying weight of a well-thrown sandal. Everyone expects babies. You are now a walking womb with eyebrows. Each month brings new hopeful gossip and the occasional awkward herbal tea from an elderly neighbour. You pretend it helps. It doesn't. Your stomach becomes a public spectacle. You can't even yawn without someone narrowing their eyes and whispering about signs from the gods. Every passing burp is interpreted as a possible symptom. People start offering you seats, prayers, and unsolicited fertility advice involving moon phases, sheep livers, and strategic sneezing. The pressure is relentless. You cannot attend a dinner without someone casually suggesting a potion or pointing to a cousin who birthed twins after eating nothing but barley soup and optimism. Your mother-in-law starts leaving little clay figurines of chubby babies on your pillow. You find them endearing until you discover one has your nose. You drink the teas. You try the recommended rituals. You sit in silence before the household gods and recite every hopeful chant you can remember from childhood. You also try not to scream when someone pats your belly and says soon. You're not even late. You are just bloated from lentils. Your husband becomes quiet, not unkind, just quiet. He avoids eye contact when the topic comes up, nods politely when your mother brings up nurseries, and changes the subject to drainage systems whenever he can. You begin to suspect that ancient Roman plumbing is his emotional escape hatch. The physician is called. He is a man with a robe that smells like vinegar and a beard that houses secrets. He pokes at your wrists, mutters about your humours, and prescribes a regimen of boiled lettuce and less anxiety. You thank him. Then you cry into your pillow and wish you lived in a society where people didn't track your womb like it was a solar eclipse. You consider faking a pregnancy just to get a few weeks of peace, but that leads to another problem. Roman women are expected to produce results, not illusions. You imagine the look on Aunt Lucilla's face if you claimed to be with child and then failed to deliver one 9 months later. She'd throw a full amphora at your head and call it encouragement. One afternoon, you retreat to the garden with a basket of grapes and a complete absence of hope. A friend visits. She's older, wiser, has 6 children, and the permanent eye twitch to prove it. She sits beside you, eats half your grapes, and tells you to breathe. She says you are not broken. You are not cursed. You're just living in a society where your entire worth is often tied to your uterus and your ability to produce another small, sticky human. You love her for that. You almost cry. Then she tells you about a woman down the street who swears by wearing goose feathers in her sandals. You laugh until you hiccup. You start saying no. No to the tease. No to the suggestions. No to counting days and interpreting dreams. You focus on surviving each week without snapping at a well-meaning neighbour holding yet another charm shaped like a turnip. You light a candle. You whisper a prayer. Not for a baby. Not yet. Just for quiet. For space. For the ability to exist without being measured by potential or timing or fate's deeply inconvenient sense of humour. Because in Rome, everyone wants a baby. But sometimes what you need most is a moment to remember that you are more than a vessel. You are a person, with opinions, with limits, and very possibly a mild intolerance to herbal tea. You got pregnant, you have a child, they scream, you scream. The nurse shrugs. Diapers don't exist, neither does sleep. Your husband names the baby after his uncle. You do not approve, but you're very tired. The uncle in question is a man who once fell asleep in a vineyard and woke up convinced he could talk to goats. You suggest other names. Your husband insists. You surrender. You're outnumbered and leaking from places no one warned you about. Motherhood in Rome is not gentle. There are no pastel nurseries, no gentle lullabies, and absolutely no baby monitors. What you have is a small, loud human, a nurse with permanent judgment in her eyes, and a household that suddenly seems one room too small. You are exhausted. You are sore. You are somehow always slightly damp. The baby cries, constantly, sometimes because they are hungry, sometimes because they are gassy, sometimes, you suspect, just to test your will to live. You bounce them, you rock them, you attempt to sing, but you forget all the words and end up humming the melody of a funeral dirge. It works. Briefly. Your mother-in-law appears daily with advice you did not ask for. She suggests rubbing the baby with olive oil. She also suggests rubbing you with olive oil. You pretend not to hear the second part and smile politely, while your child spits up onto your only clean tunic. There are no diapers, there are cloths, and buckets, and a system so complex it may as well require engineering diagrams. You learn to read the signs, the sudden stillness, the ominous silence, the particular facial expression that means prepare the laundry. You lose track of time. Days blur into each other. Your hair becomes a nest. Your toga has crusty bits. Visitors arrive to congratulate you. They comment on the baby's cheeks and your tired eyes. They bring gifts, mostly useless. A carved rattle, a silver spoon, a charm to hang over the crib that wards off jealous spirits, and, allegedly, bedwetting. You thank them and try not to cry when someone asks when the next one is coming. Your husband beams with pride. He holds the baby like it's a political alliance. He parades the child through the forum. You watch from the window, covered in spit-up and wondering if this is what triumph feels like. You remind yourself that this is temporary, that you're not alone, that mothers before you have done this barefoot with 6 children and a goat in the kitchen. The nurse is competent, which is to say she does not flinch when the baby howls like a banshee or when you accidentally fall asleep mid-sentence. She tells you to rest. You try, but your brain is a swarm of bees and every creak in the house sounds like a crisis. You count ceiling cracks and try to remember who you were before you became a source of milk and worry. Eventually the fog lifts a little. The baby begins to smile, or at least gurgle in a less terrifying way. You manage a full meal. You brush your hair. You go outside and feel the sun and realize the world did not end. You survived. You're still tired, but you're also a tiny bit proud. You created life, kept it alive, dressed it in a tunic the size of a napkin. You're a Roman mother, a force of nature wrapped in linen and resolve. You hold your baby. You kiss their forehead. You whisper a promise that one day, when they are old enough, you will tell them the story of how they were named after a man who thought he was a goat. And then, maybe, you will finally take a nap. Your husband buys a new chariot, starts oiling his arms a lot, and grows a beard for the Republic. You develop a sudden interest in philosophy, wine, and ignoring him entirely. It begins subtly. A new toga with slightly more flair than necessary. A sudden opinion on gladiator fitness routines. He spends longer at the mirror, adjusting his fibula clasp just so, humming old military songs like he fought in a war instead of arguing about drainage in the Senate. You try not to laugh when he flexes while reaching for a fig. Then he buys the chariot. Shiny, ridiculous, red wheels, gold trim. It has the energy of a man who's been told he's irrelevant and responded by making sure everyone hears him galloping down the street at 7 a.m. He calls it a necessary tool for statecraft. You call it what it is. Loud compensation. He starts referring to himself in the third person. Not always. Just when discussing philosophy or chariot handling. You catch him practicing speeches in the atrium, gesturing to an invisible crowd. The dog looks concerned. You start pouring your wine a little earlier in the day. Your own interests shift. You suddenly find the works of Stoic philosophers very relatable. Seneca's bits on tolerating fools become your favourite bedtime reading. You consider writing your own treatise titled On the Endurance of Egos. You attend lectures, quietly, in the back, with snacks. You also become excellent at the art of strategic nodding. When your husband begins yet another monologue on the state of the Republic and how facial hair reflects internal virtue, you nod. You say interesting while counting the cracks in the ceiling. You've reached a place of internal detachment rivaling any priestess. His friends enable him. They are also going through it. One grows his hair long and starts quoting Homer while drunk. Another joins a mysterious cult involving goat masks and loud drumming. You host a dinner where 3 of them debate toga lengths like the fate of Rome hangs in the balance. You spend most of the night petting the cat and plotting your escape. One evening your husband returns home flushed with pride. He's been challenged to a chariot race, for honour, for exercise, for reasons that make no sense to anyone sober. You smile, tell him to wear the bronze knee guards and make sure the will is up to date. He thinks you're being supportive. He loses the race, dramatically, falls into a puddle. The crowd laughs. He sulks for 3 days, emerging only to oil his biceps in sorrow. You console him with wine and remind us that real greatness lies in wisdom, not wheel speed. He nods solemnly and then immediately starts pricing faster horses. In quiet rebellion, you stop pretending to care. You host quiet gatherings with friends who read scrolls and whisper spicy gossip. You invest in a better wine cellar. You wear your most comfortable tunics and absolutely no underlayers. You nap in the middle of the day, in public, like a woman who has given up on subtlety and embraced her final form. Eventually the chariot collects dust, the beard goes grey, the oiling slows. He returns to his old self, mostly. A little humbler, a little quieter. You still don't talk about the puddle. You both move on. Because midlife in Rome is not about reinvention. It's about surviving the absurdity with grace, sarcasm, and maybe a few well-timed naps. And if your partner happens to briefly believe he's a war hero with racing credentials and philosophical biceps, you let him have his moment. Then you finish your wine and go read in peace. Your husband passed away, probably from ego or oysters. You're now a widow, which means freedom, financial independence, and a lot of dramatic black veils. You're sad. You're rich. You're finally in charge of the olives. It starts, as many Roman deaths do, with the dinner party gone sideways. He insisted on eating a tray of shellfish that smelled like Neptune's laundry basket. You warned him. He waved you off and called it an aphrodisiac. 12 hours later, he was whispering apologies to the household gods and clutching his stomach like he'd swallowed a small amphora. The physician came. He declared it fate. You called it inevitable. The mourning period begins. Officially, you are to wear black, cover your hair, and walk around looking appropriately devastated. Unofficially, you are now the most interesting person in your social circle. People bring you cakes. They whisper. They want to know if he left a will or just vague threats scribbled on papyrus. You keep your answers cryptic. It's more fun that way. You wear the veils, you sigh at doorways, you receive condolences with the solemn dignity of someone who just inherited 3 vineyards and a house with marble floors. It is a difficult time, emotionally, but also thrilling. Because for the first time in your life, no one is managing your schedule. No one is telling you to smile more. No one is asking for figs at 3 a.m. You get to make decisions, you move the furniture, you fire the lazy servant who kept misplacing your sandals, you rename the family dog, you put your name on things, you take long walks alone and no one asks where you're going or why. It's glorious. Like vacation, but with more legal documents. People begin to notice. Widows in Rome are complicated. You're respected, but also watched. You're wealthy, but must pretend to be subdued. You host modest gatherings with excellent wine and just enough poetry to keep it respectable. You flirt politely with senators. You raise an eyebrow at a young poet who writes you a sonnet and then pretends it was about the moon. You update your wardrobe. Still dark, but fashionable. You commission a tunic that makes people gasp and then pretend not to. You wear jewellery again, but slowly. A ring here, a pin there. Nothing too bold. Just enough to remind the world that you are still very much alive and now legally allowed to make your own choices. Your family visits. They bring advice and casseroles. They hint that you should remarry. You pretend not to hear. Your cousin suggests a nobleman with good teeth and questionable politics. You nod thoughtfully while feeding your cat a piece of fish. Later, you host a dinner and seat him next to a woman who collects funeral masks. At night, you light a lamp and walk the halls. You speak to the household gods. You thank them for the lessons, for the patience, for the quiet. You remember your husband, not fondly, not bitterly, just accurately. He was a man with opinions, ambition, and a very sensitive stomach. Now the house is yours. The staff listens. The olives are harvested under your orders. You keep the books. You pay the bills. You sleep diagonally across the bed. No one wakes you with politics or indigestion. You are a Roman widow, feared, admired, slightly envied. You wear your veil with style and your freedom like armor. People say you walk taller now. You do, because you've finally become what Rome never expected you to be. Your own. An old flame returns. They are slightly more wrinkled, but still very poetic. You meet in secret under a fig tree. It's wildly romantic until you trip over a tortoise and bruise your dignity. You pretend you meant to sit that way, sprawled dramatically on the ground like a tragic heroine. Your old flame offers a hand, says something devastatingly vague like, "I see time has only sharpened your fire," and you try not to laugh because you're fairly certain there's a fig stuck to your back. Their voice is the same, low, deliberate, with just a hint of dramatic suffering. The kind of voice that once made you swoon, and now mostly makes you wonder if they're cold or just always sighing. You sit on a bench carved with bad poetry and worse craftsmanship, and suddenly you're 16 again, hiding love letters in sandals and dodging Aunt Lucilla's moral radar. They have brought wine, not the cheap kind. They remember your favourite, and you feel something warm creep into your ribcage. Is it love? Is it indigestion? Hard to tell. You sip and let them talk. They tell you they never forgot you, that they wrote verses in the army camp, that your name is etched into their heart like a wax tablet left too close to the fire. You do not swoon. You raise an eyebrow. You ask what took them so long. They say fate. You say your in-laws. You both laugh and realize you missed this. The ease, the banter, the lack of political ambition. They're older now. So are you. You notice the little things. Their hands are calloused in new places. Their hair has more stories than style. Your face is wiser, less willing to hide how tired you are of small talk and status. But in this strange Roman twilight, with figs above and a tortoise possibly judging you nearby, it feels like time folded in on itself. Of course, this is still Rome. Nothing is ever just simple or soft. There are eyes everywhere. Neighbours with ears like hawks and gossip that moves faster than plague. You cannot be seen with a former lover, especially one with a reputation for stirring poetic chaos and at least one confirmed duel. So you walk home separately, 5 paces apart, like strangers heading in the same direction out of pure coincidence. You do not speak of it the next day, not aloud. But a note arrives, folded neatly, tucked into a fruit basket. The handwriting is unmistakable. You read it over breakfast while your servant pretends not to look curious. The note says simply, "Still under the fig tree. Tonight. You should ignore it. You have laundry, responsibilities, a temple donation to organize, but you go. Of course you go. Because Roman widowhood is many things, but rarely boring. The second meeting is quieter. No tortoise. Just moonlight and stories. You talk about everything you missed. About the time they tried to woo a senator's daughter and ended up exiled for 5 months to a farm with goats. About your own years of marriage marked by olives, sighs, and a lot of dental complaints. You laugh until your ribs ache. You touch fingers, just briefly. Nothing comes of it. Not officially. There's no grand affair. No marriage pact. Just two people with history and humour finding peace under a fig tree. You still walk home separately, but now there's a new lightness to your step. You're still a widow, still in charge, still respected. But sometimes, under the right moon, with the right wine and the right tortoise-free bench, you get to remember who you were before everything else. You're older, wiser, and completely done with nonsense. You date deliberately, flirt efficiently, and demand good bread. The younger women ask for advice. You offer them wine instead. This time around, you're not here for mediocre poetry or unseasoned olives. You have lived through marriage, childbirth, social climbing, in-law politics, midlife chaos, and possibly one or two plagues. You know what you want, and more importantly, you know exactly what you do not. You attend gatherings with a new kind of confidence. You are not the blushing maiden hiding behind a potted fern. You are the one seated near the host, sipping wine like a queen, quietly judging everyone's sandals. Men approach you cautiously. The smart ones bring clever conversation. The bold ones bring cheese. The foolish ones quote Virgil. You let them. You no longer entertain suitors who confuse passion with volume or mistake entitlement for charm. You have no time for men who gesture wildly about politics while spilling wine on your tunic. You want wit. You want depth. You want someone who knows how to enjoy silence without treating it like a personal failure. Your first date as a seasoned Roman woman is surprisingly pleasant. He is a merchant. He smells like cinnamon and financial stability. He compliments your earrings without making it weird. He listens when you speak and does not once mention his chariot collection. You are impressed, almost suspicious. You finish dessert before making any promises. Your friends are curious. They tease you gently, like cats circling a warm spot. They want to know if it's serious. You say no, not yet, maybe never. You are dating now with the grace of someone who knows she is not trying to fill a void but simply pass the time in a way that feels delicious. The younger women flock to you. They whisper their romantic woes in your ear at dinner parties. They ask if it ever gets easier. You raise an eyebrow and pour them more wine. You tell them to stop falling for men who think quoting Ovid makes them deep. You tell them to eat the cake, say no early, and learn to walk away without explaining. You become something of an oracle, a matriarch of flirtation and firm boundaries. You are known for sharp advice and excellent taste in sandals. Suitors begin to understand that approaching you is not a game, it is an audition. And you are a very discerning judge. One evening you go on a date that feels different. He is older too, a scholar, wears simple clothes, has thoughts on architecture that do not put you to sleep. You walk together through the market, talking about everything and nothing. He does not try to impress you. He simply enjoys your company. It feels easy. You did not expect that. You do not rush. You never will again. You take your time. You ask questions. You listen to your own instincts, which are louder now, sharper, funnier. You can smell desperation and narcissism like a hound on a hunt. You know your worth, and it does not shrink in the presence of attention. It grows. You are dating again. But now, you do it like a Roman empress wrapped in linen and wisdom. You leave dates early if they bore you. You kiss slowly if they don't. You walk home alone on purpose because your house is quiet, your sheets are clean, and your cat does not interrupt you when you're reading. You are not searching anymore. You are selecting. You remarry. It's quiet, respectful, and surprisingly pleasant. You both enjoy long walks, gossiping about senators, and judging everyone under 30. True love, Roman edition. There's no parade, no wolf mask, no shrieking aunt throwing flower petals into your hair like it's a military celebration. Instead, it's two adults who have absolutely no interest in drama and a deep appreciation for naps, warm bread, and conversations that do not involve anyone storming out. You met him at a bookshop, or what passes for one in Rome, a scroll stall wedged between a cheese vendor and a man selling suspicious talismans. You reached for the same badly copied satire and laughed when he pretended to let you win. It was comfortable from the start, like sandals that don't need breaking in. There were no breathless declarations, no grand poetry. He did not compare your eyes to stars or your laughter harp music. He said plainly, "You seem intelligent and very tired. I like that." And you, exhausted by a lifetime of theatrical suitors, found it refreshingly perfect. He was widowed too, a former bureaucrat who now spends his mornings tending herbs and muttering about public fountains. You like his honesty, his blunt affection, his complete disinterest in impressing anyone. He wears the same tunic to every dinner party. You think it's bold. Everyone else thinks he only owns one. The wedding is brief, a few witnesses, some wine. A friend officiates with more snark than sentiment. You wear a new tunic that doesn't itch. He brings you a garland made of actual herbs from his garden. You laugh. He offers to cook. You wisely decline. Living together is surprisingly easy. He gives you space. You give him directions. You learn each other's rhythms. He wakes early and recites Latin to himself. You stay up late reorganizing the spice jars and cursing whoever labelled two things mint when one is clearly time. He talks to the cat like it's a senator. You find it charming. There are no games, no tests. When he says he'll be home after the market, he is. When you're in a mood, he brings figs and quietly disappears until it passes. You write him notes that say things like, "The laundry is dry and I like your knees." He writes back things like, "I made soup and your opinions are better than Cicero's." You go on walks, not for exercise, for judgment. You pass couples and whisper commentary. You make up backstories. You rate sandals. Sometimes you sit in the forum just to count how many young people say literally in one conversation. It's delightful. Your friends are skeptical at first, then quietly envious. They notice you smiling more, sleeping better, laughing with less effort. They ask what your secret is. You say low expectations and shared loathing of the same people. They nod like you've just handed them the answer to the universe. There are no scandals, no hushed whispers, just two grown adults who have run out of patience for pretense and now live in a state of gentle amusement. You still keep your own room, you still keep your name, you still keep a drawer full of sarcastic letters you never sent. He respects all of it. Sometimes at night he reads aloud, not because he thinks it's romantic, just because it helps him sleep. You listen, not to the words, but to the steady comfort of a voice that does not demand, dramatize, or disappear. It may not be fireworks and sonnets, but it is steady, warm, and real. The kind of love that brings you tea when you're grumpy and never touches your scrolls without asking. And after everything Rome put you through, that's more than enough. You leave the city, you buy a villa, you grow herbs and tell your grandchildren wildly exaggerated stories. You never tell them about the flute girl or the fig tree. You tell them you once outran a chariot, that you debated Cicero, that you single-handedly negotiated peace between two feuding patrician families using only a basket of olives and your withering glare. They believe you, mostly because you say it with such calm authority while feeding them honey cakes and pointing vaguely toward the horizon, like the past is a place you could walk to if you had the right sandals. The villa is quiet, blissfully, gloriously quiet. You wake to bird song, not market criers. You fall asleep to the sound of wind rustling through olive trees, not some neighbour arguing about taxes and drainage. Your days are ruled not by clocks or schedules, but by sunbeams on the tiles, and how many figs have fallen from the tree by midday. Your dog, an aging creature with one ear and a suspicious dislike of statues, follows you everywhere. He does not care about your past. He only cares about scraps and belly rubs and barking at shadows. You adore him. You named him Senator. He has never passed a single law. The herbs grow wild and a little chaotic, like everything else you now love. You dry them carefully. Use them in teas. Sell them when you feel like it. You tell the villagers they are for digestion or dreams or banishing nosy neighbours. Sometimes you hand out bundles wrapped in cloth with mysterious symbols drawn in ink, and refuse to explain what they do. The locals think you might be a witch. You encourage this. Visitors come occasionally, old friends, former flames, grandchildren, even your cousin, who still insists striped tunics are flattering. You nod politely and pour more wine. They sit on your terrace and marvel at your peace, your independence, your apparent refusal to care about anything unworthy of caring. You serve them olives, cheese, and a story. Always a story. But you never mention the fig tree, or the love letters, or the night you ran through the rain just to kiss someone who had once called you dangerous and meant it as a compliment. You never mention the decisions that shaped you or the ones that nearly unmade you. Those live in a locked box in your mind, wrapped in silk, protected by time. You keep a small scroll tucked in your drawer. It's faded and smudged, but the handwriting is unmistakable. You read it on cold nights when the stars feel too quiet. It makes you smile. You put it away. You let it stay in the past where it belongs. Your grandchildren grow older. They start asking questions, real ones. Did you ever love someone you weren't supposed to? Were you ever afraid? Did you make mistakes? You ruffle their hair. You hand them more cake. You say yes, but not in the way they expect. Then you tell them about the time you faced down a tax collector, using nothing but a stare and a broom. It's a lie. They love it. You tend your garden, you feed the dog, you laugh often and loudly even when you're alone. You write letters you never send and bake bread that no one asked for. You keep the secrets you want to keep, and you release the ones that no longer sting. You're not hiding. You're resting. You're not lonely. You are full of stories, of lessons, of laughter, of memory. Rome still buzzes somewhere far beyond the hills. Let it. You have earned your quiet. And if one day someone finds an old love poem beneath the floorboards, well, let them wonder. You sit under the olive tree reminiscing about a life full of poetry, politics, and people who couldn't dance. You realize the great truth of Roman love. It was rarely tidy, but it was never boring. The branches above you sway gently in the breeze, casting shifting patches of sunlight across your lap. The same tree you planted years ago, back when you still thought your husband might learn to do his own laundry. He didn't. But the tree flourished. So did you, in your own sideways, sarcastic kind of way. You sip wine from a cup that has seen better parties and stare at the horizon like it might blink back. You think of all the people who passed through your life, the poet who stole your heart and maybe your sandals. The bureaucrat who taught you that kindness can sound like silence. The flute girl, still unnamed in your memory but oddly present any time someone plays a melody that makes your bones ache. You remember your wedding like a fever dream. The wolf mask, the incense, the dog crying louder than your relatives. You remember the marriage itself, all those years of side glances and social expectations, the slow shifting from strangers to something almost resembling teammates. You remember the joy of your child's first steps, the agony of their fevers, the strange pride in teaching them to throw a sandal with precision. Your memories are stitched together not in order but in flavour. The sweetness of stolen figs, the sharpness of bad wine shared under moonlight, the salt of tears held back during formal dinners because someone made a joke about childbirth again. You remember being young and too loud, then older and too quiet, then wise enough to ignore both labels entirely. You think of the mistakes too, the letter you never sent, the conversation you had too late, the apology you should have accepted, the grudge you let live longer than it deserved. But you carry them all now like smooth stones in your pocket, worn, familiar, harmless. You chuckle, thinking about how many people believed you were scandalous. You weren't, not really. You were just curious, honest, hungry for something more than embroidery and polite nodding. You had opinions, you shared them, loudly. Sometimes during funerals you regret very little. A grandchild runs past you chasing a lizard. You watch with amusement as they trip and pop back up without missing a beat. They are loud and chaotic and slightly sticky. You adore them. They will grow up hearing your stories and only later wonder which parts were true. That's how it should be. Your dog snores nearby. His face has gone white with age. He has seen more of your tears than any priest ever did. He is your greatest confidant, and the only one who doesn't interrupt when you tell stories. The olive tree creaks in the wind. You lean your head back and close your eyes. The air smells like time and memory. You think of how love in Rome came in so many forms. Arranged, forbidden, fiery, polite, transactional, reckless, late blooming, and utterly baffling. Love that left bruises. Love that brought bread. Love that ended in silence but left you wiser. You lived it all. You felt it all. You survived it all. And now, in the golden quiet of your final chapter, you realized the olive oil was never just for cooking. It was for anointing the ordinary, preserving what mattered, smoothing out the rough edges of a life that was never tidy but was always yours. You smile, let the sun warm your face, and whisper to no one in particular, "What a story." At some point, you realize something has shifted. Young men straighten up when you enter a room. Older women smile knowingly. Someone whispers your name like it's a cautionary proverb. You are no longer the romantic lead. You are the example, the woman whose story gets told with the raised eyebrow and a lesson attached. And honestly, you've never felt more powerful. You used to walk into rooms wondering who might fall in love with you. Now you walk in wondering who will dare challenge you. The answer is, not many. There's a new kind of hush that follows your footsteps. The kind reserved for people who've survived both heartbreak and toga fashion, disasters with their wit intact. You don't flirt anymore. You converse. You do not giggle. You chuckle softly and say things like, "How quaint." You offer advice that sounds vague but is secretly devastating. When someone asks for your opinion, you give it. Slowly, like a drop of venom from a polished spoon. You've become the kind of woman men invent excuses to avoid offending. One young senator called you intimidating. You thanked him. Another said he'd heard you once made a magistrate cry at dinner. You did. It was about olives. And it was justified. Your neighbours treat you like a cross between a local oracle and an unsupervised cat. Some days you bless their gardens. Other days you steal their wine and leave unsolicited advice on papyrus scraps. You are a one-woman revolution in a comfortable shawl. Teenagers ask if you were always this terrifying. You weren't. You just got tired of apologizing for knowing things, for being things, for taking up space with opinions sharper than most people's jawlines. Now you speak like a storm cloud with excellent posture. Once someone asked if you were ever in love. You stared at them until they reconsidered the question entirely and asked where you bought your sandals instead. Smart choice. You host gatherings now, not parties. Gatherings. There is cheese, wine, and a strict no-whining policy. You toast to bad decisions that taught you good boundaries, to crushes that didn't deserve you, to the power of a well-timed eyebrow raise. And people listen, even the smug ones, even the ones who used to talk over you. They sit and absorb your stories like they're sacred texts, because they are sacred, messy, glorious, yours. One day a mother brings her son to meet you. He's wide-eyed and wearing far too much cologne. She says he needs a role model. You nod solemnly and offer him a honey cake. He eats it too fast and nearly chokes. You don't flinch. You simply pour tea and ask him if he's ever been properly rejected before. It's a warning, a lesson, a gift. And now people speak your name carefully, like it might trigger something, like it might summon a ghost. You aren't a ghost. You're the storm that never passed, the love story that didn't end the way they expected. The reason someone somewhere has commitment issues and excellent taste in sandals. You've become folklore with a pulse, a woman they admire, fear, and tell stories about. You don't mind, you prefer it. You earned this reputation one disaster at a time. You sit on a stone bench in the forum and watch the cycle repeat. Young lovers arguing loudly, secret glances near columns, dramatic reunions that last exactly one season. Rome keeps falling in love the same way it always has, loudly, messily, with too much confidence and not enough foresight. You sip your wine and think, yes, that looks familiar. There's a girl pacing in circles, pulling at her sleeves, waiting for someone who is, according to the sun, at least an hour late. She keeps checking over her shoulder like she's hoping Jupiter himself will intervene. You know that feeling. Hope mixed with denial, seasoned with a pinch of sweaty panic. A few feet away, a boy recites something that might be poetry, or might be a shopping list in iambic pentameter. His sandals are untied. His heart is clearly in trouble. Two older lovers argue over figs. Not politics, not inheritance, just figs. One prefers them overripe and dramatic. The other likes them neat and predictable. You can tell they'll be together forever. Anyone who argues about figs in public has already made peace with love's ridiculousness. Behind them, a woman flirts with a spice merchant who definitely should be focused on weighing cinnamon. Instead, he's complimenting her hair and offering a discount that suspiciously only applies if she returns tomorrow. She will. They always do. The spice of attraction is conveniently sold by weight. You sip your wine slowly, like a scholar observing a case study. Because that's what this is. A living dissertation in foolishness. A thesis in heat and hubris. Rome has not changed. People still risk their reputations for a decent set of shoulders and a poorly timed compliment. You hear someone yell, "It's not what it looks like," and someone else scream, "You said she was your cousin." You nod. Classic material, a timeless favourite. They'll make up by the Feast of Minerva or break up by moonrise. Either way, the drama is rich and deeply seasoned with regret. And through it all, you sit. Not alone, but apart. Like someone who has read the final chapter and decided to reread the good parts. You know what comes next. The rush. The crash. The awkward encounter at a dinner party 3 months later where one of them brings someone new and the other brings wine and vengeance. You used to be part of that dance. You once stood where that girl stands now, hopeful and overdressed, heart perched on a fragile ledge. You once wrote those frantic notes, those love poems disguised as philosophy assignments. You once fell in love on purpose. Now you fall in love with the view. Because there is something deeply satisfying about watching people learn, not in a cruel way, in a knowing way, like a baker watching someone knead dough too hard and remembering all the overcooked loaves from their youth. You want to tell them to go slower, to breathe, but you don't, because they won't listen, and that's the point. Someone kisses someone else near a statue of Venus. They pull away too fast, embarrassed. Then they laugh. Then they do it again. You raise your cup to them in a silent toast. May your love survive bathhouse gossip and mismatched horoscopes. The sun begins to set and the forum changes colour. The drama doesn't stop. It just gets better lighting. You stretch your legs, adjust your shawl, and decide to stay a little longer. Rome may not learn, but it performs beautifully. And as another argument flares near the fountain, you lean back and smile. You've already lived this opera. Now you get to enjoy the encore. There comes a quiet afternoon when no one needs you, no one is asking advice, and nothing dramatic is happening at all. You sit with the sun on your face and consider the question people always ask but never mean. Would you do it all again? The love, the mistakes, the bad poetry, the wrong people. You smile, you adjust your sandals, and you think, yes, but with better timing and fewer olives involved. It's not nostalgia. You're not polishing the past into something it wasn't. You remember the chaos, the heartbreaks, the days you cried over someone who could barely string a sentence together without mentioning his horse. The nights you swore you'd never fall for anyone again. You remember it all, and you'd still do it. Because for every disastrous flirtation, there was a moment of pure, ridiculous joy. A sunlit walk, a look across a crowded atrium, a note passed under a table. You lived those moments fully, absurdly, and with your entire heart. You might have overdone the metaphors and underdone the boundaries, but it was all gloriously alive. You remember the first kiss that made your knees forget how to function, the first breakup that made you consider moving to Gaul, the first person who made you laugh so hard you snorted in public and didn't even care. You remember the mistakes too, like trusting anyone named Marcus who owns more than 2 tunics. Never again. There were days you wanted to run away, and one time you did. For 3 hours, you brought snacks and dramatic intentions. You came back after realizing you forgot your good sandals and emotional resilience. Still, you were proud of yourself, and that counts for something. You think of the people you loved. Not all of them deserved it, but some did. Some showed up with figs and apologies. Some remembered how you liked your wine and your silences. Some were brief and blinding. Some lingered like the scent of old perfume. Not all love lasts, but not all love has to. And the things you learned, that waiting by a column never makes someone arrive faster, that asking direct questions is terrifying but effective, that true love may look less like a poem and more like someone remembering to fix the roof before it rains. You learn to trust your instincts, and then you learn to trust them more. Would you do it all again? Yes, but you'd stop explaining yourself so much. You'd leave the party earlier. You'd say no faster and mean it. You'd dance more, especially when no one else was. You'd wear the dress, eat the cake, kiss the wrong person once and then never again. You'd spend less time trying to be impressive and more time being sincere. You'd forgive yourself sooner. You'd ask for help. You'd tell that one senator his toga was hideous. You'd keep the letters, but only reread the funny ones. You'd understand that heartbreak is not failure. It's just part of the recipe. And here you are now, in the quiet, with the sun, and sandals that finally fit. No regrets, just gratitude, not for every moment, but for the fact that you had them, that you lived them, that you survived your own story and came out with better taste in both shoes and people. So when someone asks if you'd do it all again, you answer honestly, yes, absolutely. Maybe with fewer figs and more sleep, but yes, because it wasn't perfect, but it was yours, and that in the end is more than enough.